It's the Wednesday edition of the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We've got everything you need to get your day started with Pitt conversation and topics. And we missed out on a pretty big one that we should have talked about yesterday, but unfortunately it happened after we went to press for the Tuesday edition. So we're bringing it to you right here on Wednesday. You've already got your morning shave, you already got your morning shower, and now we're bringing you the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And the news, of course, I should say before we even get into the news, make sure you subscribe and like this video. Like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And that way you'll never miss anything that we're doing on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. There's a little subscribe button right down there on the yellow.com. Click that, and you can also subscribe if you go to our page, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You can turn on notifications. You'll get an alert sent to your phone, so you will never miss anything we put on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, whether it's the daily Morning Pitt video, whether it's our live Panther-Lair show. We'll be live tonight at 8:30 p.m. for an hour of all Pitt sports talk, or it's our post-game shows on Saturday. You got back-to-back 8 o'clock games coming up here. Louisville this week, North Carolina next week. Who knows what time we're going to start? I don't know. I don't have any set time in mind. It's an 8 o'clock game. I'm hoping we're on the air, so to speak, by midnight, but I can't guarantee that. Well, you don't want to miss the show, so make sure you're subscribed to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Turn on the notifications, and you'll get an alert sent to you so you don't miss it. You can join the conversation right off the bat at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Of course, everything's an extension right there. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Football, basketball, and recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com. Now, the news, which actually I think was brewing over the weekend, if you were following the message boards on Panther-Lair.com, there was some rumblings about potential news coming in this regard late last week and then over the weekend regarding sophomore wide receiver Jaden Bradley, who announced Monday afternoon that he'd be transferring out of the Pitt football program effective immediately while continuing to finish, I believe, the academic semester in the fall before finding a new home for the spring semester. And this news, like I say, if you were on the message boards on Panther-Lair.com, maybe not a terrible surprise to you. But I think for a lot of people on the outside, it was a bit of a surprise. And there's always a question, I think, and this question sort of in and of itself is a bit of an answer to some other questions. But there's always a question when a guy transfers at midseason and enters a transfer portal at midseason. You say, what? Why would you go now? There are some times where it makes sense. So like A.J. Davis transferred last year, left, I forget when it was, third or fourth week of the season, and it made sense for A.J. Davis to transfer. If he knew he wasn't going to get an opportunity, and he was clearly behind Izzy Abanikanda, he was behind Rodney Hammond, two younger players, a sophomore and a freshman respectively at that point, and he was behind Vincent Davis as well. And so it made sense for A.J. Davis. He knew he wasn't going to get that opportunity, and it made sense for him to go into the transfer portal at that point, basically to take himself out of the mix for playing time later in the season at Pitt, which was the smart play because he still had a red shirt that he could use. He was playing his fifth year, but that was his super senior COVID year in 2021, but he never redshirted. So by getting out of Dodge before he played, more than 4 games, he could preserve the opportunity to redshirt, apply a redshirt to 2021, and then transfer and play at least one more year of college football, which I think is what his intention was. If he had stayed at Pitt, there was probably a good chance that he would end up playing more than 4 games, lose the redshirt, not really make that big of an impact, and his college football career would be over. And so it made sense for A.J. Davis. I understood that situation. I could see what he was going for. Other guys who have missed the opportunity for a redshirt, guys who, they're not trying to leave at a certain time just to preserve a redshirt, that makes a little less sense to me. Now, there's some situations, and I think we're seeing it quite a bit right now, where coaching staffs have been fired, head coaches have been fired at midseason or earlier, and players are deciding to transfer then. And I understand that, again, to some extent, particularly if they're trying to preserve a red shirt. I kind of think you could still wait it out. And if you've already burned your red shirt, or you've already used your red shirt in the previous year, or you're not going to have an opportunity to use it this year, I still think it sort of makes sense to wait it out, to play out the rest of the season to see how it goes with the new coaching staff, to get, to continue playing with, your teammates and your friends, your brothers and all of that. And also to put some more tape out there that as schools, evaluate you in the transfer portal, they could look at the tape and see what you did over the course of the final half of the season. But to leave after 6 games at the end of an off week, not right at the beginning of the off week, not right before the off week or anything like that, but at the end of an off week, 6 games into the season where you've lost the opportunity for a red shirt, you're not going to be able to recapture that. You'll have a red shirt available for future use, but you're not going to be able to apply it to this season. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And I think when Jaden Bradley, and I'm being slightly rhetorical with some of that line of thought, because we're going to get to maybe what happened here. When Jaden Bradley made his announcement that he was going to transfer, there was some segment of the Pitt fan base that said, see, this is what happens when you run the kind of offense that Pitt is running right now. Receivers don't want to play in this offense, they're trying to run away from it. Maybe, maybe not. I can't speak to whether or not that motivated Jaden Bradley's decision at all. But I could say that I don't know what you gain by leaving right now. I don't know what you gain. If that's truly your concern, that this offense doesn't highlight wide receivers and feature wide receivers, okay, maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong. I mean, never mind that you just caught like 9 passes over the last 2 weeks, 2 touchdown passes and all that. But if there's a concern about the passing game and a concern about the offense, running away from it when you're, again, not trying to preserve a red shirt or anything like that, doesn't really seem to make a lot of sense. And I sort of would back that up by saying I don't think that's the case. I don't think he was running away from an offense that he didn't care for. I think as different things have come to light, and I think there's a more extended discussion of this on the message board than we'll get into right here, I don't know that Jaden Bradley and the coaching staff were always seeing eye to eye, either on his usage or maybe his conduct within the program or his fit within the program. And I think at a certain point it was decided probably on both sides that it was time to move on. Bradley presents it publicly as a decision to transfer. I'm sure Pat Narduzzi will support that narrative publicly, because it doesn't do anyone any good to tear a player down or bash a player or anything like, or say, no, we kicked him off the team. And I think this was probably a mutual parting of ways. I think both sides were ready to be done with each other, or at least content to move on from the relationship. And I think it probably, this decision and this move reflect mostly or almost entirely on Jaden Bradley's relationship with the Pitt coaching staff more than his feelings about Pitt's offense. I mean, if anything, he had his 2 most productive games of his college career in the last 2 weeks, or in the last 2 games. He was getting more involved, not less. And any kind of on-field reasons you would look at for Jaden Bradley's decision, it doesn't really line up with just about anything. Whether the fact that it's 7 weeks into the season, 6 games into the season, that he's been producing lately, that he's been playing a lot despite a seeming propensity for taking penalties, and some bad penalties, including on special teams. But he was still playing a lot. He was getting a lot of snaps. And like I say, in the last 2 games, he's been getting a lot of targets, and he was getting opportunities and had 2 pretty good touchdown catches. So they move on now. And, I think you sort of quickly move to the impact. I mean, sort of why it happened is in most cases less significant or less relevant than what happens now. And Jaden Bradley had sort of elevated himself into, certainly at least the number 4 wide receiver role. And I think you could even look and say he might have passed Bub Means as the number 3 receiver. I think there were a lot of sets that were, particularly in this last game, in the Virginia Tech game, because Kanate Mumfield didn't play. I mean, you were looking at Jared Wayne, Jaden Bradley, and Bub Means on the field for long, long stretches. And that was their primary personnel grouping, going in that 11 personnel with those 3 receivers on the field. And so he's playing a lot, and that leaves a lot of snaps open for someone else to step into. Now, again, they didn't have Kanate Mumfield in that game. He's going to be back, and so you'll have him out there, and your top 3 receivers presumably will be Mumfield, Means, and Wayne. not necessarily in that order. But you're going to need some depth behind it. And one thing, and I probably could find, Panther-Lair shows where I talked about this, definitely different spots on Panther-Lair.com where I wrote about this. Even going back to the spring, even with Jordan Addison on the roster, the wide receiver group didn't have a lot in the way of numbers. I remember writing a lot that I really liked the top 5 of Jordan Addison, Konate Mumfield, Jared Wayne, Jaden Bradley, and Jalen Barton. This is before Bub Means entered the picture. I really liked that group. I liked that combination, or even with Bub Means, I think. But that's not a lot of guys. That's 5 or maybe 6 receivers out there that you'd like to have a little bit more depth. In particular, you were talking about Bradley and Barton. Those are guys who hadn't done a whole lot to that point in their careers. And so you didn't have a lot of depth. It was a talented group. We really liked the high end, the top end talent of the wide receiver group, but you didn't necessarily feel great about the depth and feel great about the numbers. And you take Jordan Addison out of the mix and the numbers, obviously the talent takes a hit, but the numbers take a hit. And now you take Jaden Bradley out of the mix and the numbers take a hit even more. And this is the biggest impact, is now you're one injury away from, presumably relying on, Miles Alston, who's a redshirt freshman, got his first playing time this season and really hasn't played all that much, just a handful of snaps. Or you're working your way down to Gavin Thompson or some of the true freshmen, Addison Copeland and Chewabuko. And that's not really the spot that you want to be in. I still believe this offense operates really well out of that 11 personnel with 3 receivers, 1 tight end, and 1 running back. If you have an injury, if something happens to one of those top 3 guys, I think you're going to end up in more 12 or 21 personnel, whether you're out there with 2 backs or 2 tight ends. But the important thing is you're going to be out there with only 2 wide receivers, because you're just not going to have the depth to go 3 wide all that often, or to use that as your sort of dominant personnel package or your primary personnel package. Even now, I think it's going to be a challenge to go with that as your primary personnel package, because you just don't have a lot in the way of numbers. Maybe this accelerates the team, the offense's full-blown commitment to run a pro-style offense with 2 backs and a tight end and 2 receivers, and just say, well, this is what it's going to be. I don't think that's going to entirely be the case, but we might see more of it, just because you are running into this depth issue with the wide receivers. And to me, that's the thing this does the most. It limits the opportunities to spread defenses out. It limits the opportunities to go 3 wide or even, God forbid, 4 wide. And really kind of spread a defense out to create not only passing opportunities, but to create rushing lanes. Spreading the defense out, making guys cover sideline to sideline, opens up rushing lanes in the middle of the field that aren't there when you only go 2 wide, and you have everybody bunched in between the tackles on defense. And so you're further limited in those opportunities. And I don't think that's for the better of the offense. Now, I do think Mumfield, Wayne, and Means make for, I think they can be a pretty good trio of wide receivers. It's just a question of how much you're going to, are you going to run those guys out there for every snap in the game? So it'll be really interesting to see what not just the personnel, choices they make as far as what players they put on the field this Saturday night at Louisville, but just as much, and if not more so, the formations and the personnel groupings. How often do they go with 2 backs? How often do they go with 2 tight ends? How often do they go with 3 wide receivers? It's going to be something that's very interesting to watch. I don't think at this point it's going to end up leading to opportunities for the freshmen, for Addison Copeland and Chewabuko. I don't think those guys are going to get on the field just quite yet. I think it might take another injury or 2, or another unique personnel situation to get one of those players, one of those true freshmen on the field. But they definitely got a step closer. I don't think there's any question about that. And that kind of leads me into something else I wanted to talk about today, is just where are the freshmen? Last year we saw freshmen play and freshmen make an impact. Rodney Hammond played a lot and made an impact. Jaden Bradley played enough to burn his red shirt and made a little, some impact. He had a couple plays. Gavin Bartholomew obviously played a lot. PJ O'Brien got out there a decent amount. And those 4 guys did not redshirt last year. Rodney Hammond, Jaden Bradley, Gavin Bartholomew, and PJ O'Brien. This year, Sam Vanderhaar has burned his redshirt opportunity as Pitt's punter. He's played in all 6 games so far. But the other, there's 10 freshmen on this team, 10 scholarship freshmen. The other 9 guys, nobody else has burned their redshirt opportunity. Right now, Rylan Gandy, the defensive back, the cornerback, he's the closest. He's played in 3 games. He played in the first 2 games on special teams, and then he played 5 snaps on defense against Rhode Island. And that's been the extent of his playing time. He hasn't played in the last 2 games. But you can play up to 4 games. And right now, Rylan Gandy is the only one that's even close to that number, having played in 3. Sean Fitzsimmons is another true freshman. He got on the field against Rhode Island, played 9 defensive snaps. And other than that, the other 7 players have not seen the field. That's the receivers, Addison Copeland and Che Wabuko, the offensive linemen, Ryan Baer and Isaiah Montgomery, the defensive end, Sam Okunlola, who I think might have had an opportunity to get on the field, but he was hurt, wasn't in uniform. I don't think he's been in uniform for a single game this season. But when they ran into some depth issues at defensive end, I wonder if Okunlola might have been able to get some snaps out there. I know he impressed the coaches and his teammates a lot during the spring and into training camp. So I wonder if he might have gotten an opportunity. But like I say, he's been hurt, so that's kind of limited his chances. Jimmy Scott, the other defensive end, has not been on the field. Linebacker Kyle Lewis has not been on the field. So those 7 have not even seen the field yet. Now, we've seen in previous years later in the season as it gets kind of past the window where you're not running the risk of redshirting, of blowing a guy's redshirt. If you play him now in game 7, well, that's 1, and you have 3 more games that you can play him over the final 6 games or so, 6 or 7 games, depending on how far you make it. And so you kind of run a little bit more of a risk if you end up having to put him in. The later you wait, the less there is. If there's only 2 games to play, what I'm saying is if you get to a point where there's only 2 or 3 games to play, you've eliminated the possibility of burning a red shirt for a guy who hasn't played yet. So you can be a little more free. Okay, hey, Kyle Lewis, you can go out and get some special teams coverage unit snaps. Jimmy Scott, you can go out and get some, special team snaps, or maybe 1 or 2 snaps at defensive end or something like that at the end of a game. You can use those guys in those situations. Right now, you're counting down the clock to when you're going to get outside that window where their red shirts could be burned. And quite frankly, Vanderhaar is already gone. I could see Rylan Gandy playing in 2 of the next 6 regular season games and possibly, postseason, whatever. I could see him getting 2 more games of snaps, which would burn his red shirt. I don't see Sean Fitzsimmons playing in 4 more games. I don't see, either of the offensive, well, we'll get to the offensive lineman in a second. Isaiah Montgomery, I don't see him playing in 5 games the rest of the way. I really don't see Ryan Baer, actually. We could talk about him. We talked a little bit yesterday when we discussed Carter Warren being out for the season. Even if Ryan Baer plays, I would be surprised if he ends up getting in on 5 games, unless there's an injury. Jimmy Scott, like I said, I don't see him playing 5 games. I don't really see the wide receivers, Addison Copeland or Che Wabuko, playing 5 games. I don't see Kyle Lewis, the linebacker, playing 5 games. And while I think Pat Narduzzi and his staff, they don't refuse to play freshmen. I think they'll play freshmen if freshmen can help. Rodney Hammond played. Gavin Bartholomew played. They'll use those guys if they can help. But right now, Ryan Baer is 1 or 2 plays away from getting on the field. But Isaiah Montgomery, there's not really a need for him. There hasn't... the defensive end depth has taken a hit, but I don't know if Jimmy Scott's really ready to step in there, which is why he hasn't played. Like I said, Okunlola maybe could have gotten on the field if he wasn't hurt. Linebacker, there hasn't really been a need for Kyle Lewis. And while the wide receivers may have left something to be desired, and like I say, their numbers are a little thin, they've been okay so far, not needing Copeland and Wabuko. It's a small class of freshmen with only 10. And only one guy that was really kind of guaranteed to play in Sam Vanderhaar. But they haven't necessarily needed those guys just yet. Now, next year, when there's a bigger class that comes in, maybe 20 or 22, freshmen, then you're going to have some more opportunities, particularly with some of the depth holes that are going to open up. And when you have that many guys, you're kind of, you probably have a better chance of getting some guys on the field. But right now, this looks like the extent of the freshmen and guys who are going to burn their red shirt, Vanderhaar and maybe / probably Rylan Gandy. and that's it. And you'll go in with two true sophomores next year. Now, with the transfer portal situation being what it is, I am of the mind that there's no need to really hold guys or sit on guys. If there are guys who can help you, you should play them because you never know who's going to be around. But at the same time, if you burn their red shirts, year after year after year, even if they're not playing all that much, that gives them that sort of escape window, that parachute that they can get out in the middle of a season, kind of like AJ Davis did last year. And not, and still be able to preserve that red shirt and keep an extra year to play. So it's a balance to find. I tend to come down on the side of play whoever can play. If somebody can help you, play them. And if you end up burning their red shirt even for minimal contributions, who cares? Chances are they're either going to, transfer or go to the NFL or something or other, and not going to be around for 5 years anyway. I would probably take that attitude if I was a college football coaching staff, but I'm not. So, everybody has to do it their own way. But, main takeaways from Jaden Bradley transferring is just that it hurts the numbers at wide receiver. I think that's the biggest thing. I still think that whether he's on the team or not, the priorities in the passing game need to be Konate Mumpfield, Jared Wayne, and Gavin Bartholomew. Like, those are the three guys who need to see the bulk of the targets. The priority in the offense as a whole is still going to be the running game with Izzy Abanikanda and Rodney Hammond, and getting the ball to those guys any way you can, putting the ball in their hands and letting them make plays because they are arguably your two best players right now. And then, like I say, I've talked about, the rhythm of the passing game. All those things are still important even without Jaden Bradley. All those things were going to be needed to be the priorities coming out of the off week for the second half of the season. I think they continue to be the priority coming out of the off week for the second half of the season. And Jaden Bradley's decision to transfer, whatever went into it, whatever motivated it, doesn't change those goals, those priorities. And quite frankly, I don't know that it changes Pitt's success all that much. I still think Pitt's chances of success all that much. I still think there are bigger fish to fry on this offense, or bigger, there are bigger targets, and there are more important players on this offense who are going to ultimately determine how far this team goes. All right, make sure you like the video while you're here. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. Find it all at Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com. Don't forget, tonight, 8:30 p.m., we will have the live Panther-Lair show right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You can tune in. You can ask your questions, post your comments. We have the chat screen going, and so it'll be like a little back and forth. We'll have a conversation. I'll talk for a little bit. You'll post your comments and questions, and we'll discuss it. We'll talk about whatever's going on in Pitt sports, whatever new comes up throughout the day today, and then anything else that we've already talked about. Carter Warren, Jaden Bradley, recruiting, the rest of the season, all that stuff. We have a lot to discuss. So make sure you tune in tonight, 8:30 p.m. on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like I said, while you're here, like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, and we'll talk to you tonight for the Panther-Lair show right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.